there you can see BoarControl with a couple of Saronite chain gangs in his opening hand. Sjow starting out with Murloc Paladin with Grimscale Chums in it. So tends to be a little bit on the aggressive side. But again, I've been seeing Zubot versions of this, which still play Curator package in them as well with quite a bit of top end. And there's something to be reckoned with. They pretty much have game at every step of the way.
Yeah, I've not seen a lot of the Zubot. How aggressive is that particular variant?
So the thing about me for Zubot is that you play it when you're running Galaka Crawlers. So that would speak to something Sjow could be doing here because he's left Rogue up. The other thing it does is it splashes onto Zoo very well because Zoo is playing Pirates at the moment with the South Sea Captains. So there is a lot of incentive to play it if you want to be leaving up Rogue, because Zoo is just such a powerful deck right now that you have that splash potential as well. But with BoarControl, again, leaving up Druid and Priest, if Paladin is the third deck in your opponent's lineup, something aggressive works very well against that. One of the best ways to fight against Murloc Paladin is to simply chew away their minions in the early game, and then they don't have an easy time seizing back the board.
Interesting to see how BoarControl's recent streaming, casting and stuff stands him here in good stead with his patches in his opening hand. He has been prone in the past in big stage matches to not tilt as such, but to get pretty down on himself if things don't go his way early on. And this is round one against Sjow. He can't afford to get down on himself here.
Well, he's still got a good matchup, so that's, I think, one of the big things that's factoring in for him here. The fact that he has tempo plays that can buy him value as well, that's the 1-2 punch versus a Murloc deck, is being able to value and tempo at the same time. So the patch is certainly hurting that potential a bit, but his opening hand is still very good.
Yeah, and already from his reactions, he's much calmer than in previous times I've seen him on stage when slight negative things have happened to him. In the past, he starts getting so down, it's so incredible, but this is a man who's changed, I think.
We're early in the day, too. You know, say this is round 4 and these players are 3-0, how much does that patches draw suddenly affect him in that situation instead? You know, not every player is going to be affected by that idea, but some players will be. And to me, that is really something to speak about as well, is the mental fortitude you have to have when you're facing unfortunate incidents. They're going to happen over the course of a tournament. You have to handle them in stride. You can't just let them take over and let that snowball your tournament out of control.
Yeah, I mean, 9 rounds of Swiss, things are going to sort of balance out. Obviously, there'll be 1 or 2 people have it a bit of a tough time, but basically they balance out. You've just got to look at this and say, okay, that's one of them. Let's hope there aren't too many more today. And so far, he's doing fine. Sjow, though, is going to get incredible start here with his hand.
This is about as good as it gets if you're playing the Murloc Paladin. However, again, BoarControl has some pretty hefty ways to start fighting against this.
Yeah, plenty of options available. He may start with a Swashbuckler and just see what more options he can get. Paladin has plenty of cheap buffs that could come in handy here.
I'm looking at that Firefly token. I'm looking at that Swashbuckler, and I want to say that Backstab is aimed at the Murloc, but there is an option for BoarControl to just simply fight for that board, and because he's drawn that patches, maybe save the Backstab for like turn 3 or turn 4 when there's a minion maybe he can't handle as well.
This might be the turn to dagger up. I think you want that dagger active, but it's really slow if you do it now. So he's got to work out when he can find time to spend that 2 mana to get the dagger, which is so powerful against these small minions.
Yeah, when you're fighting for an early board, that is the early turns are what decides who's at the advantage.
Yep.
And so making sure that you're absolutely picture perfect is so important. You don't just account for the cards that are in your hand, you account for the cards that you're likely to draw too. Yeah, let's say BoarControl feels like he's at a big disadvantage here. He needs to play for what his likely draw is that can help him in that case.
And he has decided that, okay, I've got a turn 3 play, which is just empty what I can see. There aren't many great 3-drops in the deck. There's Captain, there might be a Fledgling, especially if he's going the aggro route, but there might not be much more.
It's a Zubot.
It's a Zubot.
That deck has been such a good performer when I've seen it. That card is just so good in this deck. It's like unnerfed Shattered Sun Cleric in this deck.
Okay.
Back in the day, Shattered Sun Cleric used to be just a 3-mana 3/3.
That doesn't seem fair.
It was not fair. It was very, very strong. And because this deck needs to play Murlocs in its early game to suit up the synergy properly, Zubot just makes a lot of sense.
So it doesn't actually do a whole lot as such in one go. It's just the incremental amounts that it does for you in this early game.
It's that tempo and value that you're looking for. It's something that Murloc Paladin doesn't have a ton of since Murloc War Leader lost the health buff on its effect.
Yeah, people have been scrambling to find a way, because Murloc War Leader is still super good.
Oh, yeah.
But they've just been scrambling to have that little bit of consistency that they lost. And maybe this is the answer. We're going to find out. If we're seeing it already, and we've talked about it already, this might be the day where you see lots of Zubots.
I spoke with a few players this morning as well, and a lot of them seemed like they were bringing Murloc Paladin.
Interesting. Want to see how that turns out.
For BoarControl, however, his hand continues to polarize. He's got a couple of very late game plays and then a lot of dry hand in this situation. I think BoarControl is in a lot of trouble. His first 2 pickups were not good.
Something he has to think about here is when he wants to remove the Murlocs. Now, that sounds a really strange question, but if they're going to get buffed later by maybe a Blessing of Kings, maybe there's a bigger fish to fry than this 2-2. That's why he's taking so long over this turn. And actually, he's decided that he's got so little resources, he wants to get another dagger for another 2 attacks.
I'm quite surprised by that because the Swashbuckler could potentially provide him a resource, as well as the same token that we saw the Sarnite Chain Gangs get mulliganed away. So if he were to draw Sarnite Chain Gang in this spot, he would want those small minions out to start chipping away some damage. That's not really his main priority in the matchup, however. His main priority is to stifle the aggression from Sjow and let his late game take over. However, when his hand is quite weak right now as it is, I'm curious if he needs to spend his resources a little bit more liberally and try to find the time to do that.
Yeah, so his decision last turn was exactly that. It's, do I think I have enough resources to hang on one more turn? Or do I have to like start getting a little bit sort of all in?
And he concluded he did not have enough resources.
Right, he doesn't have enough resources. He didn't feel the all-in was worth it to hang on. He thinks he could actually buy one more turn, and he bought another turn. And now he's got rewarded for that by picking up his deck hand.
Well, in this instance, it panned out about the same because he would have been daggering up anyway this turn. So what happened was he actually lost the information on that Swashbuckler, and he lost the attack on those 2 minions.
He did gain a couple of health out of it, though.
The consequence of that, of course, is say he draws SI7 Agent in this spot.
Right.
SI7 Agent looks a lot better if he hangs on to these minions instead. I mean, no matter how you slice it, there are benefits and consequences to plays. And it's my job to help illustrate that to you.
Yeah, and this is where these top players end up being the better players, because it's not anyone, but you can make that decision when it's open to you and it's obvious these are the 2 choices. What these guys do is identify what their choices are so much better. Some people wouldn't even have considered daggering up last turn as even an option.
BoarControl, he's going to hold the Swashbuckler rather than the Flame Element.
He's just valuing his hero power as a complete and utter, as a resource that you can just keep using for 2 mana a turn.
Well, what do you think of the 1-2 over the Swashbuckler? Because the Swashbuckler, again, provides him potentially a resource for next turn.
I mean, it stops Sjow from having the option to use his hero power. It doesn't, but it straight up stops that, whereas the Swashbuckler wouldn't trade. But like you say, he's giving up a potentially great resource. But I like how he's going about this. He's trying to just hang in there until things change, and things will change because there's a Bone Mare in his hand and a Lich King.
Well, Sjow looks like he's approaching the first turn. He may stumble as well, and Sarnite Chain Gang gets picked up. So now BoarControl has some information. He knows that Sjow does not have a Murloc in hand because the Grimscale Chum did not actively buff something.
Right.
A big point of information for BoarControl. The second thing he now knows is that Sjow is a little bit more aggressively oriented, but that Zubot helps him piece together a lot more of what the deck looks like. He can now expect Cairn to be there. He can expect Cobalt Scalebanes. He can expect the Curator and no Primordial Drake.
And he is writing down a lot of stuff. I suspect he's writing down Show's potential list here and trying to work out what things are missing, what things could be in his hand. That information, there's no Murloc. When the deck is full of Murlocs, there might not be that many things left over.
Yeah, and just look at his facial expression. He's clearly starting to take that into account, and that's where this high-level thought begins. How can BoarControl take advantage of this or minimize Show's advantage in that case?
Also needs to try and work out how much damage he can afford to keep taking in his face.
Ooh.
Wow.
That is very interesting. That looks like a pretty fantastic play to me, but so does the Sarnite Chain Gang.
This guarantees that you get something to do on turn 6, however. And again, with that dagger that he's forcing himself to use a lot of, this now means he's definitely got to play on turn 6.
This also means that a buffed minion will more likely stick to the board.
Right.
Because he's going to be using the Sarnite Chain Gang to try to absorb some of this damage instead. You see Sjow playing as wide as possible, try to diversify the resources and maximize this redemption. So now with Cairn and Bone Mare on deck, Show's plans are played out. And BoarControl picks up South Sea Captain to go along with this. But I imagine there is going to be some weird attacks here to start things off.
Yeah, Boar will start off by trying to work out if he can actually say, right, Sjow has chosen not to play this secret. Was there a time he could have snuck one in there? Is there a secret it cannot be or would not be logically?
Yeah, so this checks for the Noble Sacrifice as well as takes out a minion. So that was step number 1 for him. However, this does end up working out, I think, in one of the weaker panouts for him in terms of trading onto the board, because now, any way you slice it, Sjow is left with something left. However, that something left is not going to be able to eat this 4-5 afterwards. And Patient Assassin!
That is so good right now against Sjow's hand.
Holy smokes, that's one of the best outcomes he could have had from the portal.
Yeah, that's a really good one. And suddenly, I mean, Rogue, we were talking about it. He loves this tempo, and that is all the tempo you can need. A free kill your opponent's minion.
I think Rogue would love to play with Patient Assassin right now, but they need to play with Prince Kaliseth, so you can't.
That could work fine. Hang on. What could go wrong?
First time you play Kaliseth and it's not yellow. That's what could go wrong.
Yeah.
And look, BoarControl doesn't... He ends up saving that Swashbuckler for a long time, I believe partially because of this Galaka Crawler that I was not alluding to on his thought process.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of
Sjow
sense
plays
as well.
the Zubat, BoarControl knows that that card is in the deck.
Yeah.
100%.
So, is this going to be an impatient assassin? It's going to be like a crazy buffed assassin.
But look at this now. The first 7-mana turn goes over to BoarControl.
Yeah. And
Can he fight off the Cairn properly, though? I don't think he can, actually, in this instance.
he can buff the assassin and just bump into it.
Is that what you want to do? That is quite an interesting
Or
play,
you could
though.
buff into the chain gang and bump into it, kill the assassin off.
And that's the play that I'm looking at, because
Yeah.
that means if Sjow was to return a Bone Mare of his own, that they would then be both left with just Bone Mare turns, and that leads directly into BoarControl having a Lich King.
One thing that's interesting about the Bone Mare buff, and I'm sure it's deliberate, is the taunt is usually a downside. Not always against some aggro decks it defends you, but a lot of the time it plays out like you want to taunt a minion that's going to go through for the kill or whatever, and it's easily targetable. You can't hide it behind a 1/6 or something.
You want to leave behind like the big powered, little health behind a taunt. is what you're
Yeah,
saying.
and so you don't get that double use out of a lot of stuff. But obviously against aggressive decks, the taunt is fantastic. So
Well, it protects the Bone Mare as well.
yeah, which is big enough in its own right. Okay, so
And that's exactly the play that BoarControl's going for here, is rather than leave the 2/2 on board, he's going to end up leaving the Cairn up. So this pans out about the same way. However, I think this protects him versus some more unobvious plays. Like, say it were just to be Scalebane plus a hero power instead. I think this works out a little bit better than if he had just Bone Mared the Serenite Chain Gang and gone in.
right.
It's also a little bit stronger versus a weapon.
Looking at his hand here as well, he didn't really waste any resources, but he got those extra 2 dagger ups out of it. And all that's happened is he hasn't played a 3/3 captain out of all those opening turns. So all that daggering up he was doing has really made a lot of sense here.
He's used his life total very liberally, and that's an important measure against Murloc Paladin in particular, because there's not a lot of burst damage in Murloc Paladin.
Yeah.
So your life total becomes less valuable in terms of the amount of health that you have, and the board it means everything in that circumstance. So I like the way he's played this so far.
Yeah, play around a couple of weapons, play around a consecration if you really have the chance to, but you don't really have to play around it, and off you go.
And I think this is going to be quite a straightforward turn from BoarControl, although he does have some tricks up his sleeve with that Shadow Step.
Shadow stepping patient assassin is a thing you want to try and get to happen. Whether you can force it to happen seems unlikely.
Well, something I'm looking at is if he trades the Patient Assassin, he can then attack with the Bone Mare, Shadow Step it, and play the Tar Creeper, and then Bone Mare the Tar Creeper. Tar Creeper sits in the way of the Bone Mare. It's protected from it. He gets to push 5 damage. The ideal situation for that Shadow Step, though, is that he can run that Bone Mare over a minion and make that happen.
But he is going for the play you make on ladder when you're not paying much attention. It's just, I just play my big thing, get some cards, and win the game.
Well, Sjow has shown that he does not have a big way to deal with this without Blessing of Kings, without tanking 8 from a weapon, or without a second Bone Mare. Tarim is part of that as well.
Yep.
I mean, that Lich King is looking like it's going to live, from BoarControl's perspective, a lot of the time.
Yeah, and how does Sjow do this? Does he need a curator to even get out of this trouble? Is that one of his comeback cards, or is it too slow?
And I like the push from BoarControl here. Again, I think he has a delivered hand read that Sjow does not have a way to deal extra damage at the moment. And it's going to live, and that is a major problem for Sjow. This game might have just turned the corner for BoarControl.
Yeah, he hung on so well with so little resources. Obviously, he got a stroke of luck with that portal, but he was allowed to because he held the resources long enough to be able to use that to its maximum efficiency.
The other thing, too, is how big of a role did the Sarnite Chain Gang play? Just gave him a lot of time.
Yeah. But he bought the time to get there. Like, there were situations where the chain gang wouldn't have mattered because you'd be up against a wall of stuff. Well, things have well and truly turned around. Now it's just about the process. How do I not mess this up?
Well, if your opponent didn't kill Lich King, looks like they're going to have to kill Lich King with board. So Are we going to control that boar, or are we going to start pushing? I think from BoarControl's perspective that I would favor the push. Your opponent just didn't handle Lich King or Bone Mare.
Yeah. Then there's the case of, well, I can push, but maybe they've got 1 out. Whereas if I kill everything, maybe they have 0 outs. So that's always the debate we get into in this situation. How does the pro player think the 99% turns into 99.9?
Yeah, the ideal situation for BoarControl here is that he can find a way to hedge against everything. That he starts cutting the outs for Sjow and starts delivering a time to kill that would be the same as though he were pushing damage.
Right, so if he can find a 1-turn or 2-turn lethal here, so he's going to have to push because that sets up lethal, which is absolutely fine. Sometimes you can find a way to trade and still push a lethal, but he felt that this was better. Looks fine.
And that's game. I mean, he's got Death Coil, he's got Shadow Step. Even if Sjow can handle the minions that are going on board here, BoarControl is going to be able to hit 5 for Bone Mare, return it to his hand, and then put that buff on another minion and attack again. And Sjow with no defensive capacity here, you think he's locked out of the game.
1-0 down, that's just such a minor thing, really, being 1 down in 1 round of Swiss. But because it's the first one of the day and you know the round 1 is so crucial.
He's going to try his darndest.
Yeah, Sjow's not a quitter. Sjow is one of those players who will play until he knows he has no options.
At this point, you're going to hope that BoarControl has a...
Yeah, I mean, there are players who would concede in this position, but Sjow's just not one of those players. Something he always preaches to his viewers is, you can't win if you've quit, basically. Not quite the words he uses, but it's what he says.
That's a true story. And so game 1 seized for BoarControl. A pretty weak opening hand for him, and wins despite it. That's the good feeling for the tournament.
Yeah,
Draw
nice
patches
start.
and win anyway.
Again, one thing that may come into play later in the day is obviously you use a lot of mental energy in this situation.
That's a big thing.
Round 1 of the day, you've got a long day. We talked about that already. BoarControl is actually, may use a lot of energy winning this game.
Hearthstone, I think, is very unique in some of this perspective, where a lot of the aggressive decks are thought of to be these mindless machines that pour power onto the board and, just that's all they do. In that game, we saw a ton of playmaking from both sides.
Yes.
Both with BoarControl hanging on to resources for a long time, and with Sjow figuring out how to just sequence the turn 1 and then adjust to each piece of information he got afterwards. In Sjow's perspective, that backstab changed the landscape of how his opening turn looked. Had that backstab not been there, I think Sjow is smooth sails through that early game. So much easier, but wasn't the case, and now we roll into what is clearly a Highlander priest from Sjow, shown by that Prophet Velen in the Mind Blast. And the Mind Blast is quite telling here. I would tend to say this is a more combo-oriented version with more card draw in it.
Right.
So you see the Mass Dispel. I'm curious if Sjow is a Gadgets and Auctioneer kind of player, or if he favors the Lyra.
I don't know. I haven't seen enough of him testing it, but my feeling is that at a tournament like this, you want the Auctioneer more than the Lyra. I just prefer it personally, and I think it's slightly better, all things being told. But if obviously against an aggressive deck, the Auctioneer becomes a lot worse. But in general, if you're just defaulting to not sure, I think Auctioneer is just a better one. You win the mirror match.
You want to draw cards in your deck rather than just get extra resources.
Yeah, Mass Dispel says the same thing, really. Mass Dispel often does nothing at all. It comes in and out of this deck. It has draw a card written on it, so it's a natural choice to try. But it does keep drifting out of the deck.
It does sometimes handle like Shaku, or like in a pinch situation, maybe peels a Bone Mare buff.
Yeah, that's very important.
This tends to be a fairly decent matchup for Sjow, but BoarControl now drawing Leroy Jenkins. This is actually an important card for him to draw right now. It may not look like it because it's not going to be used for quite some time, but the way that BoarControl wins this matchup really is by finding that one window of opportunity where enough damage has stuck to board that he can then make an aggressive push with the rest of his resources. So a big part of that is Leroy Jenkins and Shadow Step, is being able to land that 1-2 punch with some damage on board. And we saw him mulligan away the Cobalt Scalebanes. That's another card that performs pretty well versus Priest because of its inability to be removed via Dragonfire Potion. That minion surviving and then moving into an 8-mana turn means that a Leroy plus a Shadow Step suddenly offers you 17 points of damage.
Yeah, I saw a match recently. Skarakai, English player, she was playing in one of the most important games of her life to get to a big event, and she kept the Flappy Bird and the Scalebane in opening hand and mulliganed away the 1-drop and went through because of it. Just kept the stuff that beats Priest.
I think it's quite wise. Oh my gosh, and Sjow opens, he draws the Power Word Shield so that Radiant Elemental gets to stick to board and picks up Raza from it.
Yeah, this hand, I mean, if you can deal with your opponent's minions with your minions as a Priest, it just opens up so much room for your AoE effects to do the rest of the work.
Yeah, it's not really an easy thing for Priest to do because so many of its minions are just, they're pretty average stats.
Yeah.
You know, they come in at 2-mana 2/3s, and they come in at 3-mana 3/3s, and they have effects that incrementally step up that advantage. But being able to stick one of them to the board and then begin to heal it versus an aggressive opponent,
Right.
that can spell major problems for BoarControl. And Sjow being on coin here is also a big deal. It means that Raza can come down before Vilespine has easy availability with a 1-drop in the activation. So maybe he even finds value from that card.
That's an interesting turn, because if he does that, you really like to save your coin for your Anduin so that you kill their Bone Mare turn.
Yeah.
If you use your coin before turn 7, which you often have to do, the Raza play sounds really good, but it does give them that window where they can go Bone Mare and hit you for a free turn.
Yeah. The big one here is, I think, going to be whether or not Sjow can actually maintain that control without using the Anduin, or without having to save the coin for Anduin in this spot. Because, you know, prerequisite number 1, he's got to draw Anduin. And then prerequisite number 2, he has to save that coin. And right now, with that Radiant Elemental play, it looks like that Sjow is trying to aggressively attack any development from BoarControl, which I think is quite wise.
Yeah, I agree that that is a fantastic position. But again, he would just try not to if he can get away with it, rather than it not being good. Just nice to hold that coin. Also, the coin is 4 damage late in the game, but that's not really relevant in this matchup.
Yeah, the most relevant thing for Sjow on the Anduin effect is quite literally destroying minions.
Yeah. Yeah, it plays out really strange. And it's actually sometimes costly to the Prix. They do have to kill those minions. Sometimes they can just get a little low on resources. It's like a way the rogue can sneak a backdoor win just a few % of the time.
And Sjow's cooking up something here. Wild Pyromancer, launch the smite, push a couple damage, and he's going to heal. And can't heal up anything, excuse me. But this ends up with BoarControl, I think, in a pretty reasonable spot here. He's going to leave minions on board almost no matter way he slices this, but it happens to be a pirate with his SI7 agent, so he gets to chew through everything here instead.
Yeah, and the rest of his hand is getting to the point where it's only a Bone Mare short of actually being pretty aggressive. Maybe it needs a Scale Bane, that would be nice.
So the costly point here for BoarControl is if he uses this Salsi deckhand, that he doesn't have a 1-cost minion for his Vilespine later on, so he's relying on drawing something here. But this is too much of a board, I think, for him to ignore. If he lets this go, Sjow is going to run away with it if he has Raza.
Yeah, and BoarControl identifying that. He's identifying a lot of things well today and cleaning it all up best he can. Show's absolutely fine for a while.
Uh-oh.
It's adding up. But he's out of things. He's now got to play this just for some sort of challenge.
And this is where things can get tricky, is now Sjow, again, he invested very aggressively into his early position, and he's lost those minions. This Raza can be traded on board if BoarControl wants.
And that is a really important card, this Cold Blood. He can use it as an activator, or he can use it as just 10 damage with Leroy later in the game.
This is quite an interesting turn for BoarControl. But, you know, my initial instinct was simply trade this off, play the Saturday Night Chain Gang. But now that he's drawn the Cold Blood, would he rather expend that and potentially keep a 3/3 on board? I mean, he can effectively turn that Cold Blood into a 3/3 this turn, if he wanted to.
He can also save that for the Vilespine, but are there any minions you really want to Vilespine? Sometimes Velen sticks down.
It's Raza's the one you want to Vilespine.
But that means waiting a turn. So it's the only minion in the deck that really matters. Well, I mean, all the other ones just hang like Velen. You don't get a chance to kill the Velen a lot of the time because it comes down the turn you die.
Yeah, all the rest of your stuff is fairly expendable.
So maybe he just chooses to use this Cold Blood now, like you say, and just kill off Raza, move on.
How important is that burst damage? You know, Scalebane is missing from this equation.
So what he needs to add up is how much damage.
Oh my.
Nice.
Now this is quite clever. BoarControl is going to let Sjow hang on to this Raza and starts to push damage. He says, you know what, Sjow, you keep that Raza, you take your value trades. What I'm going to do is, in the meantime, push and look for an opportunity to use this Leroy Jenkins. Now that Sjow has done this with the Raza, it opens up the Vilespine, and BoarControl gets to use the Cold Blood to either push damage or to trade off on the Cabal Talon Priest. This was the ideal situation for BoarControl.
I feel that this is going into the Dragonfire turn. So he may just trade to make sure that nothing too bad happens.
Well, I think
he blows your own stuff up. So.
I think that Sjow working so hard to protect the Raza was a soft read for BoarControl that Dragonfire wasn't there.
Yeah. And now Sjow, this is what happens occasionally in this deck, is you just can't get to your stuff. Interesting that he's got to save the Master Spell for the Bone Mare as well, even though he wants to cast it.
Scalebane gets picked up for BoarControl as well. That is 100% the play in this spot, and I think Sjow is going to have to start weighing the option of using Velen strictly for defensive measure.
Yeah, 4 health a turn.
He's running out of time here. I mean, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. This is 14 power represented on board. 2 damage will kill him in this spot.
Can he get anything done with his Priest of the Feast? Not really this turn. Nothing of use. Probably wants to get that Master Spell play, but then he can't heal for much. So this is where you have to work out your slender outs. What cards can I draw with a Master Spell? Like, is Shadow Word Death even good enough if I do?
I think this is a Velen heal yourself style of turn. Master Spell is very weak. Shadow Word Death, are you kidding?
Wow.
And look at BoarControl's reaction to it, like...
Yeah, he's like, that's the one card. That's the card I named as the only card.
This opens Lich King, though, but now the fear is Prophet Velen. I'm sorry, is Shadow Reaper Anduin.
Yeah. But Lich King's kind of good in this situation into Anduin because you've still got that 5 chip damage hanging around.
It's the stabilizing after that. It's going to be.
You've got the Leroy +5. You might just be able to get away with it.
Because if he plays Lich King, he's pushing 6 damage, right?
Yeah.
So then Shadow Reaper Anduin would kill off the Lich King. He would heal Sjow for 7 overall and push 2 points of damage. BoarControl is quite dead in that situation, so he's playing wider to the board.
Last turn, Sjow cast Mass Dispel with 7 mana. So Boar has just said, you know what, you haven't got anything. You were fishing, you pulled Shadow Word Death. I know you don't have any AoE. I can just go wide with this bunch of small guys and hurt you.
Now, suddenly Velen is looking very appealing to me in this perspective. The Priest of the Feast looks very appealing as well because of how much it heals. If Sjow had played Velen here, though, he would have been able to Binding Heal for 10 and then Hero Power for 4 more.
Yeah.
Is that correct? Or is it spells and hero powers that get doubled from
I believe so, yeah. Yeah, I think that'd be right.
Oh, my. Whew.
Now, Boar has had not really the chance to test for Anduin yet because he's played around the fact he knows there's no AoE. So when you're doing that, you're not testing for Anduin. So he's got a decision to make that's a little bit more guesswork this time. And yeah, he's playing the Lich King to fish for the Anduin. And if that doesn't get rid of, if there's still a game next turn going on, he can drop the Bone Mare.
Wow, Priest of the Feast bought Sjow a lot of time here.
Such a good card. Even if you haven't got the spells in your hand, they have to kill it.
Sjow is very far from delivering a lethal blow. And he's quite far from stabilizing this board position as well.
Yeah, this is interesting. I think this is one of the more interesting matchups. I mean, the reason people will be saying it's not is because they've seen it a million times, but it seems to play out differently every single time.
It's a lot of healing Sjow just got, back to 30, but this anti-magic shell is going to be brutal.
Yeah, I mean, again, Boar just has to make some reads here. Does he think he can get away with no Anduin? I think the read is, yes, I can get away with it, to be honest.
If your opponent did not Anduin,
exactly.
there, it is not there.
Exactly. So he might just go Bone Mare. Or does he just play Minion Shell? It's quite a tricky decision which way to go with it.
I was looking at just the Leroy anti-magic shell.
And that's further complicated the situation. It's a lot of damage.
He can still... I mean, you don't want to leave Velen on board. It's much harder for your opponent to play Shadow Reaper Anduin if it's drawn when they have Velen on board.
Another thing he can consider here, actually, he's seen Raza, he's seen Velen. Sjow has 2 cards in his hand. Boar maybe think he just can't ever beat me.
Shadow Step as well. BoarControl has so many good cards in hand. He's just got to piece together how to best exhaust the rest of what Sjow's got and deliver the most damage.
Yeah, Sjow's not going to be able to do much even if he gets Anduin if you're careful here. He's not going to be able to kill you in time with 2 cards and no Mind Blast.
So there's the anti-magic shell, and there's heaps of damage coming in. So now, Sjow quite literally needs to draw Shadow Reaper, Anduin, or Dragonfire Potion here, or he's a goner.
Yep. And the Leroy Shadow Step's just too much anyway.
And actually, yeah, with the Leroy Shadow Step, I don't think that it's enough even with the Dragonfire Potion here.
That's the anti-magic shell that's just chilling there.
Well, there's the DFP.
DFP.
Ah, the heal for 4. I was looking at it as a heal for 2. That does keep him alive for a turn.
But when you're that close to dying, you know things are a bit tricky. He's going to lose.
So now, here's the play I'm seeing from BoarControl, is that with this play being made, Sjow's got 1 card left.
Yep.
If he chooses to use...
Is that enough?
That is enough. But if that wasn't enough, he could have played Leroy Jenkins and Shadow Stepped it, delivering 6 damage.
Right.
Then the next turn, used either the anti-magic shell or the bone mare alongside the second Leroy Jenkins.
A huge Leroy Jenkins.
To deliver that last bit of damage. But the South Sea deckhand here gives him just enough.
Wow.
The fancy plays.
I think he's, yeah. One more time. 2 rogue wins. And of course, that's the counter deck. In Last Hero Standing, if it goes to 2-0, it usually means the guy who's 2 behind has lost their counter deck.
BoarControl is looking...
Yeah, I don't think it was a fancy play. I think he could have killed it slightly more efficiently. And I think he just alerted himself to, oh, maybe I'm not quite 100% on this. It wasn't a fancy play. It was more of a, why didn't I just play the Leroy first sort of thing. The Shadow Step seemed irrelevant. Obviously, his thought process was not comfortable there, so he's just trying to wake himself up.
But did he not show a Shadow Step in game 1?
I don't think it's about showing it. It's just that he could have just played Leroy Shadow Step. I think he's unhappy at his thought process. It doesn't matter.
Looks great to me.
I think he just thought that Shadows. Yeah, I can see he's not happy with his thoughts.
That is a common
This is what I say about he beats himself up about the tiniest stuff. It will be something that nobody else even understands.
Well, 3rd matchup in a row for Sjow now, trying to beat this rogue. And this time he's going to have to face down the early Keleseth. And he's got Jade Druid with Galaka Crawler in it. That seems to be a theme amongst his decks, is that he is hating on pirates coming into this event.
I mean, it's a decision you have to make. Do I want to ban Rogue, or do I want to let Rogue stand up? If you want to let Rogue stand up, you lose slots in your deck. You have to play some Galaka Crawlers.
You look at this particular series here, they had the exact same classes coming into it. BoarControl chose to ban away Rogue, Sjow banned away Druid, and now BoarControl is up 2-0 with Rogue.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting. And we were talking about that must mean there's either aggro or crawlers hanging out.
It's just one match that we've seen so far. But think about the difference of impact it's had in this.
Yeah, well, BoarControl is able to not only use the Rogue, which is a powerful class, but also play tech cards in his other decks where these crawlers are hanging out in shows. Because they look kind of sad when they're 2-3 and your opponent plays around them for 6 turns.
This is an interesting play from Sjow here. A lot of times when players are playing Jade Druid, I notice that one of the more common mistakes that's made is that they play a Jade and then they just play a Jade and they play a Jade. Where with Jade Idol, the fact that you've lost a lot of the burst potential in terms of development with Innervate, that it's wise to oftentimes save Jade Idol until you can play 2 Jade men in the same turn.
Just to present a variety of threats to your opponent.
You're trying to duplicate the effect that Innervate gave you, which was just powering out more things at the same time. When he plays these one at a time here, it's still good. It still just ramps up his Jades, but notice he is missing a Jade thing next turn. That Jade Idol 1-1 right now, it's not doing anything. In
Right,
fact,
so this stuff will get picked off over 2 turns and won't matter, but if they come down later, maybe...
The benefit of this, of course, is that it really looks appealing for BoarControl to now use any pirate in the world. And that's exactly what Sjow wants him to do. Sjow would love to see a South Sea captain in this spot. He would get to ramp Nourish into Galaka Crawler, eat the captain, and then have Aya Blackpaw and Spreading Plague on deck.
And so BoarControl, with that in mind, will tiptoe around it like he did in the first game, most likely here.
He's going to play Pirates to pressure, but he's also going to play a gigantic Edwin to go with it.
Edwin Van Not a Pirate.
The technical term for him, of course.
Yeah. Hashtag not a pirate.
And BoarControl goes face with the pirate, but trades with the Keleseth.
Huh. That doesn't seem correct. Only tiny differences, but yeah.
Well, it's quite a large difference. I mean, in any event that he draws Shadow Step that he'd like to use on Keleseth, in the event that Sjow has a Galaka Crawler here, he gets to eat a 2-2 instead. That's
On the other side, you could say if he draws a Shadow, say what's used on patches for 2 sneaky damage or 1 sneaky damage, maybe. But I think it doesn't seem correct.
Wow, this is a brilliant play from Sjow.
Oh, bring your captain on. Because he didn't trade his pirates in, he's expecting the captain.
Well, not necessarily that. It's that he wants to get max value of the spreading plague. If your opponent has these little things and play their liabilities, rather than play the Galaka Crawler and just feed it to the board of the small pirates and then nullify your own spreading plague, instead he gets to utilize spreading plague, and sometimes he does find the captain as a big benefit. This was a brilliant play from Sjow.
Ball could have seen through that a little bit, actually.
I don't think he could have. I think he needed to just deal a bunch of damage. Which was right, but he got punished.
Maybe didn't need to drop the swash. He had a decent board. He was doing a lot of damage. Okay, it's a 3-3.
Yeah. He just got punished. This is gain 30 life.
Yeah, and you lost your captain.
Who needs Reno Jackson when you have spreading plague?
Oh, that still gets me going every time. You say Reno Jackson is like, I'm now out with his cast for 5 minutes.
Scale Bane gets drawn.
Look at this
These
stuff.
are just haymakers back and forth.
Love to see this. And I think we've got more of this coming with the next expansion as well, talking of haymakers.
Don't get me started on that. If you talk to me that way this early, you're going to have to take me on a date later on.
Oh my goodness.
That is insane.
All right, that's the rogue out of the way.
Lorinda literally just marked on his notepad 2-1. Now, I still think that BoarControl has a minor chance, but it is very minor. I think Sjow here is free to actually push damage, though, and not worry about the board state.
He thinks so, too.
And that's exactly what he's going to do. That swipe draw was the obvious mark for him to start pushing damage. But the 6-4 Eye of Blackpaw is really the telling part to me, where BoarControl has to attack taunts, and Sjow is free to just push the Eye of damage with the Jade until that's cleaned up.
This is the BoarControl I was talking about earlier in the broadcast, before he went 2-0 up, the one that always looks under so much pressure. Like, how much mental energy does he use up just trying to combat the pressure?
And how much does that affect him, though? You know, that's...
It doesn't for the large part, to be honest. It never usually makes him make mistakes.
Almost every player gets nervous at some point.
Yeah.
And it's quite natural to get nervous. Like
I mean, if you're not getting nervous, why are you playing the game?
I've talked to Amnesiac about it. He says every single time that he competes, he gets nervous. But he said the important part was it doesn't affect his decision.
Right.
It just affects the way that he feels. You know, being able to overcome that small facet is a big deal.
I mean, if you're playing a game you don't care about, you probably shouldn't be playing it.
And that's more than enough damage.
That is the 2-1. I don't even have to note it down.
I was thinking BoarControl swashbucklers into his own spreading plague was maybe the way to get out of it. But either way, Sjow returns with Druid. And so now, if Sjow brings this to Game 5, the ban on each side starts to look correct.
Right. So this is the important bit for Boar. If he's playing what we think, like the obvious decks, the standard lineup decks, then the Paladin's got to do a job here, because Priest versus Druid is one of the worst matchups in the game currently for the Priest. Like for any sensible matchup.
I think it's not quite as bad as it used to be, and I think another big telling point of it would be, does Sjow have Medivh in its deck?
Okay.
I was not sold on Medivh at DreamHack Denver. In fact, I was vehemently preaching against it.
There's a 4-6 in BoarControl's opening hand.
Yeah, Curator.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see what the rest of this is, if BoarControl's on the Zubot train or not.
The Zubot train.
And well,
that's like a cheap trainway.
He is on the Viles Fin into Rockpool train, which is a lot better, I'd say. But for Sjow, you know, talking about that Priest versus Druid matchup, I was not sold on Medivh at DreamHack Denver, and I was vehemently against it. And as I've started to see the matchup unfold, the loss of Innervate made you lose so much explosive potential versus Priest that I start to believe now that it is quite important. And that's a little plot twist for you there. BoarControl draws patches.
Again, by the way.
What does that mean?
It means he's playing Pirates. It means he's playing UK Paladin.
Talk to me about UK Paladin.
So they play the Corsair sometimes in UK Paladin to get the weapon into the free 0 drop, into the free patches, and then you can build stuff. There he is. Well, this seems easy.
What else do you change out of here? Like, what cards were exchanged for to have these pirates?
That's the bit I struggle. I mean, you lose some of your Murlocs because you've got a slightly slower turn 1 and 2 in return for more explosives turn 3 and 4.
Like no Grimscale Chum, for instance.
Yeah, that sort of stuff. So your turn 1 is a little less.
Does this deck still run Finja?
I actually don't know. I'm assuming it does, but I actually don't know.
It does run 2 Scale Banes.
It's a little bit... It's a deck they fiddled with a lot in the UK.
Oh, big draw from Sjow. I am jamming that Fandral so fast.
Right. And just the threat of the Nourish means it has to be dealt with, not even if the Nourish is there or not.
Here's the thing. From Show's perspective, he is looking at a weapon or Blessing of Kings being enormously good against him right now. From BoarControl's perspective, he's going to see that Fandral, and he's going to think to himself, man, I need to kill that. In this particular instance, if Fandral was played, BoarControl does not have a way to step up damage, and he would have had to trade his entire board into it.
Yep.
The Fandral is not an important facet to Show's matchup in this one because he doesn't need the explosive Fandral Jade Idol card draw turns. So the threat of that Fandral would have been a big payoff for Sjow in this instance.
It would have worked out nice.
But the risk of the tempo and value that BoarControl could buy, he opts to save it for a different time.
Yeah, so let's see how that one works out for him. The ramp is always, of course, a good investment. Just in case whether it's the best investment.
You know, say Sjow draws Wrath next turn, and suddenly that Fandral is looking so good in that instance.
So, well, the original UK Paladin, this is how, it's usually Jumbray the driving force behind the Paladin stuff in the UK. The original version, but I think they do play it now, didn't even play Tyrion. The argument being there's enough weapons already, why do we need a Tyrion? Tyrion's a lot worse, ago. Ashbring is like clutter.
And it's just an expensive card.
Right, I think they play it now because the metagame is slower than when it was first created, but just to show how much weirdness can go into creating these slightly off-the-wall decks.
Yeah, so the ramp also here playing a big payoff point for Sjow as well. He gets to chew through some board. Sees that it's redemption off the secret. Does he want to roll this Jade Train some more? I mean, Jade Behemoth is looking fantastic if I'm in Show's spot. The 3/3 Jade on board is going to contest what's there. The Jade Behemoth, in theory, puts BoarControl on notice for Blessing of Kings as well. Sjow is going to conclude that there's still a possibility that Weapon or Blessing of Kings is a big possibility, but now Scalebane can be played.
Yeah.
And Sjow, he's given BoarControl time to draw this Blessing of Kings, I think. Even in the face of Blessing of Kings last turn, with Sjow having the 3/3 Jade out, it means that he gets to swipe up the minion afterwards.
Yeah, it's something that I've never liked about this particular Paladin deck, which I'm fairly on my own on it though, but there's a lot of different synergies. They sometimes like miss each other. Like we've got this 4-mana 3/3 in the hand right now. You know, this happens, you've got to draw the right pairs of cards a lot of the time, but still, it turns out that Scalebane and Scalebane's a pretty good pairing.
And I don't think BoarControl needs to attack here. I mean, having the double Scalebane means that you get to have turns like this where suddenly Sjow could be in a massive amount of trouble. Both buffs fall onto the Vilefin Inquisitor, and that's not where BoarControl wanted him to go.
And got these massive Jades going to start getting produced very soon versus massive Dragons that are going to get produced very soon. But Show's now getting the luxury of being able to get some damage into the face. Just checking that's what he wants to do. Yeah, the 3/6 is coming through into the face.
Bump is not, I don't believe, an option here for Sjow. Not a viable one, at least. But now that he's stuck this Fandral in this spot, he's hoping that BoarControl finally doesn't have that buff. Second Corsair gets drawn. The patches is already gone. And I think that BoarControl is coming up with too little too late in this spot. He's still fighting well on board, but the problem with it is that now Sjow has hit his power spot where every single card he draws offers him a lot of potential.
Yeah.
You know, you look at like Innervate, sure, that's a little bit weak. But any Jade card he draws, any card draw that he's got available, any time that he draws damage to put pressure on board, and I think BoarControl takes the right option here of pushing, but that's a big one.
And we're going to see this recurring theme all day, by the way, which is where the fourth deck has got a job to do. And... Oh! You okay about that date for later?
Well, you made it 2-1. I'm about to make it 2-2.
Seems good.
Oh, you've made it 2-2, I just see. Yeah, there you go.
So I preemptively strike on my notes. I've said this before. I write them down early, and if I have to cross it out, the mess reminds me there's something to talk about.
That's a good idea.
Except it's a mess, so I never know what I was talking about in the first place. So there's the Medivh.
Lorinda's just one big mess.
Just a giant mess, guys. Don't be like me.
And FanDuel's, I think, has done his job. I think it's fine to trade off here and preserve the life total for Sjow, but I think he's free to use his life total as well. However, when these two cards have been held as long as they are, unless Sjow knows that the patches means that it's stuff like Corsairs he hasn't been able to play, which is clearly what he's concluded with this attack, that he's free to play this pretty much however he wants.
Now, can he get away with not playing the Medivh going into Game 5, which he knows is a Priest game?
Absolutely he can. He's got the Malfurion with FanDuel on board. The Chum, by the way, is still in BoarControl's deck, so this is much more aggressively seeded, even though the Curator's still in here. So the Curator's
so maybe no Tyrion, maybe no top end.
So I'm thinking no Tyrion. You know, he's got Ultimate Infestation, he's got the second Jade Behemoth. When Sjow got through the early game as comfortably as he did, because BoarControl he drew the patches, he drew the Corsairs and no weapon, Sjow he smooth sailed to this point, even tanking himself down to 9. That is a lot of freedom in how comfortable Sjow is when he just expends 8 life to kill that second Scalebane.
I'm going to extrapolate one game of Hearthstone through about the 2,000 or whatever are going to be played here and say that the 4th decks are going to be so crucial here. Both Paladins here failing to win a game. And by the 4th deck, I mean the one that isn't your Rogue, your Druid, or your your Priest in the normal lineup.
Well, I've heard a lot of players, when I talk to them about tournament strategy, they have said that is the trick to the format. Which deck do you want to ban, and then deciding which deck you ban oftentimes decides where you put that 4th deck and then how you build the other 3.
And you only need to get 1 win with that 4th deck. It's last hero standing. If that can go 1-1, you are sort of in such a great position. You've taken down one of the big decks.
Ooh. How about an extra 4 power and 15 health?
Yeah, how about
Game 5? Yeah, BoarControl. Sjow returns the 2 games with Druid. So now the bans look like they're both right on each side.
Assuming it's Highlander Priest.
I assume it's Highlander Priest.
That's what we're assuming. Like, it's a good assumption, especially Boar likes to play the solid decks.
And again, remember, I said that I think the Medivh is the big kicker for Sjow. That if he doesn't have Medivh, that he can struggle versus Priest if he doesn't have one of the picture-perfect opening hands. Medivh changes that landscape quite a bit, where it offers him a lot of aggressive potential. But it's Big Priest instead.
And there's Barnes in the opening hand, which is the one card you care about in your opening hand, I feel.
Mind Games in BoarControl's hand.
Huh.
I've seen versions opt for the Embrace the Shadows package.
So,
but I think I've yet to see Mind Games. What on earth? That's supposed to be a counter to
in
Big
this Priest.
This is a nod to Big Priest and to Big Druid when he plays Mind Games, because he's intending on banning Rogue. So Mind Games operates very poorly versus Rogue, but versus the 2 matchups that can throw him for the loop with the Big Priest and the Big Druid, he's got a tech card prepared.
That's absolutely insane. And
now, I'm not saying that that's going to work, but that is clearly the game plan with that. And he finds Eternal Servitude off the Shadow.
Admirable's having fun, ladies and gentlemen. Admirable is enjoying this particular game of Hearthstone. Probably rather too much.
That's just the theme of my life. I enjoy everything too much.
Good. That's a good way to live your life. It means we have balance on the table.
Amen. Is this 2 Jade things, or is this 1 Jade thing? I'm thinking 2 Jade things. However, you know, think back to the mode I said earlier. Making the 1-1 the 2-2, not quite as good as the 3-3-4-4 in the same turn.
Yeah, exactly the same deal. Exactly the same deal. And BoarControl now just has to plan out, get this Barnes going. And here we go. What's he gonna pick up?
That is the nightmare for Sjow. The last thing he wanted to see was that Barnes. It fetches Lich King, the weapon, not too vital at this stage. But now, Sjow has a clear image of what he needs to fight. Step number 1, mitigate the impact of the potential random cards from Lich King. Step number 2, set up to defeat an Eternal Servitude that you can expect to see. This is enough power to fight that second Lich King, but does he have enough gas to push past after that? I think he might. With Nourish into Jade Spirit, which is what he thought about when he went with that Jade Idol and that Jade Blossom turn, it means that he's free to trade on board very hard to kill this Lich King off, get more threat development, and then move directly into Ultimate Infestation.
Yeah, and part of his game plan may well be here not to actually kill BoarControl anytime soon, but to use those huge Jades later on as trading devices and just run BoarControl out of threats as the game goes by.
As crazy as that sounds, that is a real thing that Sjow can do, is he can actually take BoarControl to fatigue and win.
I like it when people say that I'm not quite as crazy as I sound. That's great. But yeah, that's definitely... It's not always the way. Sometimes you just make a 9-9 and a 10-10 and slap them with them, but...
Well, the Eye of Blackpaw is quite interesting, but something to note here is that now this can start to muddle the mixture of minions that BoarControl has when he casts those Eternal Servitudes down the road. Barnes will be in that pool. Aya will be in that pool, and a Jade minion will be in that pool. He could potentially find nothing of consequence.
That could actually make it bad
with an Eternal Servitude. And Sjow here with Ultimate Infestation, that is happening 100% of the time.
So I was going to say, let's see what he draws, but he just draws a load of stuff.
My gosh.
By virtue of the fact that 5 cards is a 1/6 of your deck, oddly enough, that was good.
And I love the damage push here from Sjow as well. He knows that he's in full control. He knows that his life total is not something he's worried about in this game. But the Shadow Essence, if that would have been Yashiraj, I think that BoarControl could have turned this around.
Yeah,
but it's slipping away.
It is slipping away, but still got plenty of stuff going on for now. But how is he going to start delivering this damage? One thing that Druid is annoyingly good at, and it's hardly ever spoken about, is the amount of armor it picks up. It just gets out of range of dying from small chip damage by accident as it goes along.
Well, when you have a bunch of 7 to 10 mana cards in your deck that are aimed at being expensive, difficult to use cards, that happens.
Here comes a
Sjow, he's eyeing the Medivh first, but I quite like using either the Wrath first or the Hero Power first in this spot.
Interesting. He's chosen to use the Wrath afterwards and just get the 2-mana minion to occupy the board with. All these minions, I mean, apart from the fact they can actually kill BoarControl, and they well might, every piece of damage you have on board is something that can help chip away at a 4/12.
All right, so now we have found ourselves in another interesting spot where I said those Frostmournes likely were not going to play a big role. However, we're starting to get to a circumstance where I think the Frostmournes could play a big role now. The fact that BoarControl has been pushed into this much more defensive mode.
They have to play a big role, more to the point, if he's going to win.
Exactly, and this is mind you, with BoarControl having the Coin Barnes Eternal Servitude My Lich King opener.
Yeah, never got anywhere.
It's not a free game.
It just didn't go anywhere. It looked like a free game to me. I haven't written 3-2 down, luckily, but it looked like a free game. Boar, again, he's in that situation. Are these Frostmournes my only chance? Are they a thing I can ignore, or do I have to use them?
Well, this turn may not be set up for him, but the question is, how does he get to that turn?
And this is such a difficult board to deal with. Your potion doesn't really do much. You can't put your own stuff down.
Wow.
Yeah, he shakes his head as he plays it, though. It's like, this is all I've got, really?
He's like, I've got 2 of these in hand. When am I ever going to use them if I don't do this right now?
And we saw how much he is trying to get the most out of every single card in Game 1 when he used that Rogue Dagger 3 different times.
And take note of that Fandral draw from Sjow. I don't believe that he's going to play that before he draws his second Jade Idol. I think his game plan is to play Fandral, to use a Jade Idol, and then Nourish afterwards. So in the meantime, you're going to see him use his other resources to try to get this done. And with Spellbreaker in hand, to null him up, never mind, he looks like he's going to use it to push.
Yeah, this was a difficult decision. It's like, I'm so close to winning. Do I just go at it?
Much wiser for the Galactic Crawler, I think. And honestly, the Atiesh could be attacked with here. Like, this is 2 extra damage.
Yeah, and he's going to.
And Boar's down to 5 at this point. So that shuts off Ysera's Awakens being freely played. BoarControl would have to occupy healing before using
it
Ysera's
slows
Awakens.
down every point of damage with that lifesteal ability.
And then when that happens, the Atiesh can threaten lethal with the hero power and the extra 1 damage.
And Sjow all the time has this Spellbreaker in hand as well. This looks like it is going to be the home country Sweden taking on my country UK in a 1-0 lead.
Well, BoarControl can still live here.
He can live. Should they let
The
die?
ultimate infestation kills him. Yeah, you're right. I was trying to piece together every single thing here. That Frostmourne was very slow on the previous turn.
It's interesting from where he sat that he can definitely still live and try to piece together something, but from where we're sat with that Spellbreaker in hand, there's just too many different ways to win this game for Sjow.
I mean, could Boar have used like the Embrace with Ysera's Awakens and then Hero Power the Medivh afterwards? Could he have Embraced, circled in Ysera's Awakens on that turn instead? I mean, I think he had a number of plays available to him. I mean, he had the Shadow Word Death as well. He's got to find the spot where he turns the corner is the problem. If he doesn't take big risks, he's just never going to get a payoff. And so that's what he was looking for this game, was where can I take a big risk to try to get the board position back? He concluded it was that turn, and Sjow's got the punish.
Yeah, and wins it. Ultimate Infestation to the face. Sjow 3-2 reverse sweep in last hero standing.
We saw Rogue win 2 games. We saw Druid win 3.
Yeah, that's a nice, concise way of putting this. Looked like both of them lost with their counter decks. Looked like that's such a hard thing to come back from in last hero standing.
But the thing about it is they're split bands. You could see the justification on each side.
Yeah.
And that's a big point of the matchup. I think that Sjow had a fantastic opener with his Druid in that last game. BoarControl clearly had a fantastic opener, but you saw the presence the Medivh placed in that one. Now, granted, I think Ultimate Infestation was a much bigger player in that game than the Medivh was.